Lesson 2, Modifying Virtual Machines. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe VM settings and options, add a hot pluggable device, dynamically increase the size of a virtual disk, and add a raw device mapping RDM to a virtual machine. Modifying virtual machine settings. You can modify a virtual machine's configuration in its Edit Settings dialog box. You can add virtual hardware. Again, some hardware can't be added when the virtual machine's powered on, such as you can't add a video card. You can't add memory and CPU, as you can see in our diagram here. It's grayed out. And then see the video card's grayed out as well. Now, I will say this. If we have VMware tools installed and we have, for example, a Linux server machine that has the kernel compiled to allow hot add support, we can do CPU and memory. We can't remove it, but we can add it while it's running. Windows needs to be a version such as Windows Data Center. I think maybe Windows Enterprise will allow you to do it. I'm not 100% sure right now. I'm not up to date on 2012 on what the capabilities are, but you can check if you have that version of Windows and you have it enabled. It'd be under VM options to allow hot add. You can add CPU and memory, but in this example you can't. But we see we can do disk, which we'll talk about. We can change the network. We can add a CD, DVD, ISO, or if we put one in the machine itself, and we can add floppy drives if we want to use that. You can only remove virtual hardware when the virtual machine is powered off. Again, we can set virtual machine options right here, and you control the CPU's memory and resources in here as well. Hot pluggable devices. The CPU hot plug-in option enables you to add CPU resources to a running virtual machine. As I said in the earlier slide, you need to have a version of the operating system that allows that. Examples of hot pluggable devices are USB controllers, Ethernet adapters, and hard disk devices. With supported guest operating systems, you can also add CPU and memory while virtual machines powered on. Again, like I was saying, it depends on the operating system. Creating an RDM. An RDM, raw device mapping, enables a virtual machine to gain direct access to a physical LUN. Encapsulating disk information in the RDM enables the VM kernel to lock the LUN so that only one virtual machine can write to it. Items to define when creating an RDM: the target LUN, the LUN that the RDM will map to. Mapped data store, that's the data store that stores the RDM file with the virtual machine or on a different data store. You can pick the compatibility mode and the virtual device node. Dynamically increasing a virtual machine's virtual disk size. You can increase the size of virtual disk that belongs to a powered-on virtual machine. The virtual disk must be in persistent mode and it must not contain snapshots. As you can see, if it was 10 gig, we just put 20. When we go to the operating system under disk management, we'll right click right here on disk management and do rescan. It will then see that, hey, we have some new unallocated space. Now, Windows 2008 and above, you can right click right here and do expand, and it'll expand this space on the C drive. Now, if it's not on the D drive, it'll do it as well, but earlier operating systems like Windows 2003, you'd have to use a third-party utility to do that. But in 2008 and above, this is showing it looks like 2003, so we would have to shut down. We'd have to use a third-party utility or shut down to use this extra 18 gig. But in 2008 and above, we just right-click right here and hit extend or expand, and it'll just make this whole drive 20 gig. Inflating a thin provision disk. Thin provision virtual disk can be converted to thick, eager zeroed format. To inflate a thin provision disk, the virtual machine must be powered off. You will then browse the data store to where that VMDK is living. And as you can see, this one's in the local Vsicm6 data store under Mic 2.1. There's the VMDK. We can right click on it and select inflate. Or we can use vSphere vMotion, storage vMotion, excuse me, and select the thick provision disk as the destination. So we could use storage vMotion, and you actually could storage vMotion it back to the same data store, and it'll ask you if you want it to be thin provision, lazy zero, or eager zeroed, or thin provision, and you select what you want, and it'll do it. Now, what this will do is, let's say it was thin provision and using 20 gig of data. We gave it 20 gig, but it's only using 5 gig. It will take this file when we inflate it from being 5 gig to the actual 20 gig on what we provision the thin provision as. Virtual machine options. On the VM options tab, you can set or change the virtual machine options. For example, you can have it run VMware tool scripts, control user access to the remote console, configure startup behavior, and more. See, we've got the display name, the location of the VMX file, the working folder it's in, the guest operating system type. Here's where you can do the remote console. We can expand this for VMware tools, power management. Boot options will have options to where you can say, okay, on the next boot, go into the BIOS. VMware tool options. We can have it shut down the guest, which what it'll do, if I do a power off, it'll communicate with VMware tools in the machine, and it'll do a graceful shutdown. Suspend, it'll pause the virtual machine. We can restart the operating system. Again, you need VMware tools because it'll use VMware tools to talk to the guest operating system. VMware tools scripts, if you have any scripts you want to run with VMware tools, this is we can select when to run them. If you want to check and upgrade VMware tools, you can have it do that. You can have the clock on the guest operating system sync with the ESXi host if you want to. Boot options. We can see we can do BIOS boot or EFI. We can delay the power on. Sometimes it's really hard if you want to go into the BIOS settings to catch it because they boot so fast. So we can set a timer how long to kind of delay the boot, so we can hit escape to get into the boot, or escape to get the boot options, or F2 to get into the BIOS screen. This is one I was talking about in an earlier slide. We can check that. The next time we boot, we can get in the BIOS. It'll just go into the BIOS. If we select this, we can have it wait and retry reboot if it's failed on a boot. Troubleshooting a failed VMware Tools installation on a guest OS. Problems: the VMware Tools installation has errors before it completes. The VMware Tools installation fails to complete. You're unable to complete VMware Tools for Windows or Linux installation. VMware Tools hangs when installing or reinstalling the VMware Tools install. Solutions: verify that the guest OS that you're trying to install is fully certified by VMware. 2. Verify that the correct operating system is selected. 3. Verify the ISO image is not corrupted. 4. If installing on a Windows operating system, ensure that you are not experiencing problems with the Windows registry. 5. If installing on a 64-bit Linux guest OS, verify that no dependencies are missing. You should now be able to describe virtual machine settings and options add a hot pluggable device, dynamically increase the size of a virtual disk, and add a raw device mapping to a virtual machine.